AMD is down 26% over the last year. It's been a disaster. Everyone believes AMD is dead. No one uses AMD anymore. It's the next Intel, especially if you look at the charts of NVIDIA being up 1,500%, while AMD is only up 122%. Now, I personally believe some of it is justified. If you look at the data center revenue growth, it was insane for NVIDIA at 113% CAGR. AMD still grew at 63%, but they didn't grow at 113%. But I believe AMD is nearing a major inflection point in terms of data center growth, and I'm going to tell you why. And many different things are telling me that my thesis on AMD is getting very, very close to materializing. And this video is really going to prove many people wrong that believe that no one is using AMD chips and they only use them just because they're a little bit cheaper. This is clearly not the case. The first one is Elon Musk's XAI. They are using AMD's MI300 AI chips. To me, that's very interesting. Even Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, he's using AMD MI300X and MI450 AI chips. Again, I saw, guys, no one uses AMD chips. And to me, this is very interesting. You have Oracle, which they offered clusters of up to 131,000 AMD MI355X chips in Oracle Cloud. Very, very interesting. AMD struck another $10 billion deal with Saudi Arabia's AI enterprise, Human, and they're going to have some kind of a partnership to push AI workload into Saudi Arabia, and that's going to be amazing for the company. Now, why are all those companies using AMD? Why? Not just because AMD is cheaper, but mainly because of the inferencing capabilities of AMD, which the CEO believes is likely going to reach $500 billion in terms of a total addressable market. And this is what I've been talking about, and that has been my main thesis on AMD. Is the reason why you see this chart over here of massive growth and data center revenue for NVIDIA versus AMD is because NVIDIA was early on and they were way ahead on training. And their training capabilities to train the AI models is way beyond anything that AMD could do. This is just a fact. They were early, they were ahead, and they took market share. Now, after they trained the models, inferencing comes in where they have to apply whatever this model has learned into real-life applications. For that, you need inference or inferencing. And this is what AMD has been focused on. AMD has realized that NVIDIA is way ahead in training. They know inferencing comes after training, and they've been investing a lot of money to strengthen their inferencing capabilities. And I'm not the only one saying that. Microsoft's a board member, he's saying it himself. He said AMD's Instinct accelerators have been a key part of our inferencing platform across multiple generations. And we've integrated our OCM into our stack, making it easy to deploy new models. To me, again, this is very, very interesting, where many investors believe that no one's using the AMD chips and they only use them because they're cheaper. This is clearly not the case. They use them for their inferencing capabilities, and they are way ahead of NVIDIA from my understanding in terms of the inferencing capabilities. That's why Elon Musk is using them. That's why OpenAI is using them. Microsoft, they have a massive partnership in terms of the Llama model within Meta. They're also using AMD for inferencing capabilities. And this is what comes in next after training. $500 billion market, and AMD is positioned to take massive market share from the inferencing kind of trend, and I believe we could potentially see some kind of an NVIDIA-like move over the next 2 to 3 years, and that's why I have call options on the stock going into late 2027, as I believe my thesis will likely materialize in early to maximum mid 2026. Now, revenues for AMD is still growing 36% year on year. Earnings per share is still growing very, very strong. Amazing stuff. Data center, which people believe it's dead, still growing 57% year on year with expanding operating margins. Now, they did suffer some challenges in terms of not being able to ship to China and Chinese restrictions, which is going to wait on their 2025 growth. But after 2025, it's going to get a little bit better, not just for AMD, but for NVIDIA as well. To be fair, and even their client and gaming segment with AI PCs and mainly the Dell PCs, they have a massive partnership with Dell, and this one is growing 28% year on year. So if you combine all those things with a good valuation, in my opinion, around 29 times earnings. The mean is 36 times. The stock traded as high as 65 times. Now it's trading at 29 times earnings. And this is again because of the China shipments. If it wasn't for that, the multiple would have still been around 21, 22 times. But the analysts, they had to readjust their numbers due to them not being able to ship to China. So even though it's not too accurate, it's still trading at 29 times earnings, with the company expected to grow 20% this year, again because of China. Next year, 44%, 20%, 18%, 20%. So you're paying a little bit more than one-time price to earnings growth, which I don't believe is too expensive for a company like AMD that's riding the inferencing trend. So I wouldn't be surprised if those estimates ended up being a little bit higher. But just to put up a quick calculation for AMD's valuation. Now, if we assume that those growth numbers are accurate, and to me, based on what I'm saying, I think they will likely be a little bit conservative. And especially if something changes between China and the United States in terms of relationships. But even if it didn't, those are pretty much pricing in the worst case scenario. So I believe they're accurate. Now, if I take the estimates on this case, I'm getting $9.91 in earnings per share by 2029, or around 5 years from now. Now, you guys know that I tend to look for at least a double over the next 5 years on like the base or worst case scenario. And it could be much more than a double, but I always try to just get at least a double, and I get interested in the company. So if I'm taking 991, the current P is 29, the mean is 36. I'm not going to use 29. I'm not going to use 36. I'm going to use 25, just in case it wasn't, it's just in case the growth was a little bit lower. So I take the $9.91 and I time it by 25 times earnings, which again, we're taking some things into consideration. This is $247 per share. The current price is $118 per share. This is around 110% on the upside over the next 5 years with a company like AMD. Now, if it does trade at 36 times earnings and inferencing takes a major move, we take 991 and we time it by 36 times earnings. If it did get there, this is $356 per share 4 or 5 years from now. If I divide it by the current price of 118, I'm still getting around almost 200% on the upside, 202%. So for me, no matter how I look at it, I believe AMD is still presenting a great opportunity at this price. I think my thesis, which you could say I've been a little bit wrong so far because I talked about this, I would say 8 or 10 months ago, still hasn't materialized, but I believe it will most likely materialize in early to mid 2026. And to me, based on the latest and Investors Day, I believe it will likely materialize maybe a little bit before that. And I see everything headed into the right direction, and I like it very much, which is why I still have my leaps, you could say, or it's like a spread on AMD going into late 2027. And if you're interested about learning on options and learning many different things, I share everything I do in my own group. This is the link if you're interested. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please press the like button and maybe consider subscribing. So I'll talk to you in another video.